Hi there, and welcome back to Nature in Code. So, in this lecture, um, I'm going to talk about a few things here that we sort of brushed over, but that are actually really important. Now, this code here, it looks nice, it looks beautiful, it's very readable, and it works. So, goal achieved, I would say. However, there are a couple of things that I want to discuss, given that this is the first JavaScript code that we wrote. And I want to do this by actually fixing a small aesthetic issue. And that is, if you look at our output here, these numbers are still ugly here because of the rounding issue. And so I want to get rid of this. I want to output it in a way that's consistent with what it says here. And so rounding these numbers to 2 decimals of precisions is something I would like to achieve in my code. So what I have to do simply is to essentially define a function that takes a value and then specifically the genotype values here, and then rounds those values to the 2 decimals of precision. Now, how can we do this? So it turns out there's a method here that already is available in JavaScript, and that is really handy here, and it's called math.round. Math.round. So math.round is a bit like it's like console log that we used before. We have a bunch of methods and of sort of helper functions, if you will, that already come pre-packaged with the browser and that you can use. And math.round is one of them. And what math.round does is it takes a number, say 1.23456, say, and it rounds it to the nearest next integer. So if you would do 1.6, it wouldn't round it to 1, but it would round it to 2 because 1.6 is closer to 2 than it is to 1. But in any case, say 1.23456 is the number that you want to round to 2 decimals of precision. So you'd like this to return 1.23. How would you do that? Well, the trick here is that you would have to first get rid of this stuff here, right? We have to get rid of the stuff here on the right-hand side that's not relevant, so 4, 5, 6. So how do we do this? Well, the trick is to shift the decimal point by two positions to the right. Okay, shift it over to the right. And how do we do this? Well, how do you shift the decimal point of 1.23456 2 positions to the right? Well, by multiplying it by 100, because then you get 123.456 and so on. And by the way, see here, here's again the pesky rounding issue. It will never leave you alone, but it's easy to deal with. Okay, so we have that achieved, and now we want to get rid of everything here on the right-hand side of the decimal point, and that's now easy. That's exactly now where math.round comes in. So rather than passing 1.23456 to the method, we pass the product of 1.23456 and 100. And so that gives us 123. So we got rid of the stuff here on the right that we didn't need. However, this number is now 2 orders of magnitude too large. It's too large by a factor of 100, of course, because we multiplied it by 100. So we simply have to divide it again by 100. And then if you do that, you get the correct output. So that is the trick that we're going to use. So let me actually just copy this over here. All right, and so now in my code, I'm going to define a function that I'm going to call round, no, oops, round number. And it's going to take one, it has one argument that I'm going to call value here. And I'm going to return, and we'll talk about this in a second, exactly this here. And of course, I have to replace here this 1.23456 with value. All right, so there are a couple of things here I want to talk about. First, this is now our first function that we defined that actually has an argument. The one up here that we defined didn't have an argument. And so when we called the function, we didn't pass a parameter. By the way, argument and parameter are essentially the same thing. It's just in the function definition, you call this an argument, and then when you call the function, you call it a parameter. But they're by and large the same thing. So this function here has one argument, and when I'm going to call the function, I'm going to pass it one parameter. Well, in any case, whatever I'm passing here will then be stored in sort of the temporary variable value, if you will. And then within the function body, you can use this variable called value. So there's no need for you to say var value. Just as long as you define it as an argument in the function, you'll have access to that variable here. So that's one thing that I wanted to mention. The other thing that I wanted to mention is this return statement here. So what is return? Well, return is one of those important JavaScript keywords. Return is basically saying I return whatever follows right after the return to whoever called the function in the first place. So in my case, let's see, I would, rather than printing here a1, I would call the function round number with a1 as a parameter. Okay, so I will call the function round number here. I will pass it the value of a1, whatever is stored in a1. That will get passed in here, and then it will get rounded accordingly, and then that function returns that value back to here where it was called. So that's the meaning of return. And you should know that there's actually an implicit return in every function. It's just that usually we don't care about this. So even this function here actually has a return. It's just what it returns is not important and completely irrelevant. But if you specifically want to return a specific value, then just say return, and then whatever it is that you want to return. And actually, I forgot the semicolon here. Okay, so that's return, and we'll encounter return multiple times throughout this class. Also, an important thing to note is that when a function hits a return, it will return the value to the place where the function was called, so here in this case, and it will then terminate the function. Okay, so don't do return something and then add other lines of code. Those would never get executed here in that case. So return returns the value and terminates the execution of the function. All right, so I would actually do this here as well. Round number a1, a2, pass in a1, a2, and then finally, of course, also pass it on to a2, a2. All right, so let's see if this works. Let's go to the browser. Let's reload it, and yes, works beautifully. So the rounding error here is solved. I could make this function a little bit more generic. Right now, we say, okay, we want 2 decimals of precision, and that's why we multiply it by 100 and then divide it by 100, because 100 is 2 to the power of 10. So it shifts the decimal point by 2 positions to the right, and then later back 2 positions to the left. If we wanted to shift it to three positions, we would say multiply this value by 1,000 and then divide by 1,000. how about we make this function so generic that you get to decide, or whoever uses this function, how many decimals of precisions you want. Okay, so let's say we're going to add a second argument here that we're going to call decimals. Okay, decimals of precision. So what I'm going to do here is I'm simply going to add a new line, and I'm going to sort of create a variable, temporary variable called shifter, and it needs to be that value. So 1,000 if decimals is 3, 100 if decimals is 2, and so on. So basically this needs to be 10 to the power of decimals. And once again, JavaScript provides us here with a handy built-in function, which is called math.pow, which takes two parameters. One is the base and the other is the exponent. So it would be 10 to the power of, well, whatever decimals is. And so that value here for shifter is now 100 if decimals is 2, it's 1,000 if decimals is 3, 10,000 if decimals is 4, and so on. And so basically here then I have to multiply by the shifter and then later divide by the shifter. And now accordingly I have to pass in the precision here that I want, and it's 2. So I want 2 decimals here, and then finally 2 over here. Okay, save this, reload it. All right, still works. So I made this example to bring home 2 points. One is it's really up to you to make your functions as generic as you want to. And there's always a bit of a balance that you have to find. You want to make your functions relatively generic because that means they're easy to reuse for all kinds of scenarios. However, you can start to overdo it and make functions super generic, and they can become hard to manage too, and there's going to be too many edge cases to deal with. So you'll usually find a good balance with a little bit of practice. The other thing that I wanted to do here is actually to have a function that has multiple arguments so that you see how this works, and a function that returns a value at the end. All right, and there's one more thing I would like to talk about, and that is the issue of a scope, or the concept of a scope. And that's a fairly important concept too, so I'm going to do this in a separate video in the next lecture. So see you in the next lecture.